and 60%.
Please, shall we rise to welcome His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The national anthem, please. Thank you very much. Let's be seated. Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, GCON, SAN, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget, and National Planning, Dr. Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, the Honorable Minister of the FCT, Malam Mohammed Musa Bello, the Chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Mr. Aswe Igodalo, all the other members of the board of the NESG, chief executives of private companies that are here, members of the diplomatic corps, our development partners, very worthy delegates to the 27th conference. I welcome all of you to the closing ceremony of this amazing two-day conference focused on securing our future and the urgency involved. It's been an amazing 2 days, wonderful and engaging. But this is how we'll start the closing ceremonies. As I welcome here Mrs. Adenike Adeyemi and the other members of the Joint Planning Committee that have been amazingly hardworking in the last 2 days to put together the summit outcomes. So I'd like to welcome her here as she delivers the summit outcomes, a summary to all of you. All right, so before the summit outcomes, we'll have a short video on the NESG essay competition, and then we'll have the summit outcomes.
Summit, the NESG has identified the need to ensure youth active participation in shaping our dear nation's agenda. We understand that we stand at a crossroad in the history of our dear nation, Nigeria, and our action or inaction will have lasting consequences on our future. Within this context, and to adequately articulate Nigeria's priorities for laying a foundation to securing our future, the NESG called for the applications for its NES27 essay competition from Nigerian undergraduates of every higher education institution between the ages of 16 to 25. The NES27 essay competition was anchored on the summit theme, Securing Our Future, the Fierce Urgency of Now. This year's call for essay entries drew interest for thousands of Nigerians. 185 complete submissions were received from brilliant scholars across different states of the Federation. After a rigorous review process by the NESG, the top 3 winners have emerged. Here are your top 3. The second runner-up is Helen Gofwan, a 400-level medicine and surgery student at the University of Jos.
Securing our future, the fierce urgency of now. How many more youths must walk our streets with the title unemployed? How much public debt must we acquire with the progressive devaluation of our country's currency? How many more people must die from the bullets of terrorism, the painful pangs of hunger, and the deleterious complications of disease? It is glaringly obvious that we are before a looming catastrophe which cannot afford us the luxury of cooling off in the shelters of inaction. Every Nigerian is therefore saddled with the responsibility of refusing the tranquilizing drug of gradualism, standing upon the nation's pledge, waving the flag of our future with the emblem, "The time is now."
As a second runner-up, Helen will receive a cash prize of 100,000 naira and a paid internship at the NESG. The first runner-up is Josiah Eli, a 400-level agriculture science student at Kaduna State University.
It's a privilege to be part of this year Nigeria Economic Summit essay competition with the team Securing the Future, the Fierce Urgency of Now. In my essay, I try to argue that except immediate steps are taken by the Nigerian people and government, the future, prosperity, sovereignty, and progress of this nation is at stake. I try to argue on 3 major points: national economy, national security, and innovation. There need to be radical industrialization, diversification of economy. We need to move from a consumer-based economy to one of production, and we must improve our secondary sector. I try to argue that there needs to be an empowerment of the military. Weapon needs to be sophisticated. The government must try to rid itself of any form of accomplice of terrorism. And then innovation, there needs to be radical, investment in human capital, because people are the drivers of economy. I hope that this major argument will be relevant to the summit. Thank you.
As the first runner-up, Josiah will receive a cash prize of 150,000 naira and a paid internship at the NESG. And the winner of the 27th Nigerian Economic Summit essay competition themed Securing Our Future, the Fierce Urgency of Now is Mojola Oluwa Obishesun.
In my essay titled Securing Our Future, the Fierce Urgency of Now, I have preferred feasible ideas that will aid in a collaborative approach to securing our future following the turbulences that we experience as a nation. Highlighted is the importance of government investment in digital economy to turbocharge economic development, considering the emergence of a fourth industrial revolution. Stated also is the need for a private sector-led growth strategy, giving priority to manufacturing sector. Lastly, the need for the civil society to push for the implementation of the Digital Rights and Internet Freedom Bill before the Senate to provide for the protection of citizens in the online space is addressed. Thank you.
As the winner, Mojola Olua will receive a cash prize of 200,000 naira and a paid internship at the NESG. 50 of the top undergraduates who applied for the essay contest have been part of our virtual audience throughout the summit. Congratulations to all of you. The need to engage youth in nation-building initiatives to chart a new path for Nigeria out of its doldrums has become more urgent than ever. We have all heard from our leaders of tomorrow. The time to act is now. NESG, in the national interest. Since the 25th Nigerian
Let's put our hands together for these winners of the essay competition. And as I looked into their eyes and some of their views, I see future members of the board of the NESG in those amazing young ones. Thank you very much, NESG, for encouraging the young ones and securing our future. Let me invite now Mrs. Adenike Adeyemi to present the summit outcomes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. My name is Adenike Adeyemi, and I'm representing the members of the Joint Planning Committee, made up of members of the private and the public sector, who have spent the last 9+ months planning, curating, and implementing a very successful 27th Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Your Excellency, the Vice President, Your Excellency, State Governors present, Honorable Ministers, Captains of Industries, Permanent Secretaries, and all our special guests joining in present and online, I'm just going to present a very brief summary of the outcomes of the conversations we've had. Over the last 2 days, we've had 30 sessions, and 30 sessions not even including our final session that we'll be having with His Excellency, the Vice President. We've had the sessions in formats such as interactive plenary, high-level conversation sessions, roundtable sessions, co-creation labs, and just before we started, for the first time ever, we had a debate. And the highlights of our summary are framed around the 5 sub-theme areas for which we curated the summit. When we were designing and we were planning the summit, for us, it was important for us to focus around the conversations, not just from a macroeconomic perspective, but all the other important pillars that were crucial to ensuring that we had a shared understanding of all the key issues across the different areas. We engaged using the design thinking approach, and we were very action-oriented in that. The 5 thematic areas that we focused on were around high and sustained growth, quality of life, national security, political economy, and digital transformation. And I'll very briefly go through each of them. So on the high and sustained growth, one of the things that was very important, and for those of us who remember the Nigerian Economic Summit Group's outlook for 2021, one of the important pillars was to ensure high and sustained growth. So not just growth, but making sure that it was progressive, it was measurable, and we had the impacts that cascaded across board. And the key things we discussed, starting from the plenary conversation we had, the open plenary we had yesterday, was even from the size and the potential of the economy, the population, and all the potential of the human resources that we have as a country. It was very important for everyone across public, private, and development sector to make concerted efforts in fulfilling our potential and delivering our potential on the economy. We talked about the impact of the instability from a macroeconomic level and the impact job crisis has had across all the key demographics. So whether we're talking about youth unemployment statistics and all the poverty statistics that we're all very well familiar with. And the consistent themes across all the conversations was that, again, a lot is being done and progress is being made, probably maybe not as fast as we want, but we need to continue around ensuring a consistent commitment to rapid growth that is sustainable and can be sustained in the medium to long term. There were also quite a lot of conversations around the role that the private sector has played, continues to play, and can even play much more effectively with an improved enabling environment. We talked about the importance of investing and developing in our human capital potential, particularly the demographics that make up half of the population. So whether we're talking about young people, we're talking about women, across all demographic segments. And we talked about the importance of leveraging on so many opportunities, particularly trade, regional trade, national trade, trade within and outside of West Africa and even Africa, particularly looking at the AFCTA and taking advantage of that in driving growth. The second pillar which we talked about was quality of life. And in fact, even looking at the conversations that we had, the last conversations we had here on the debate, around how the government has an important role to play in improving and enabling the quality of life. So whether education, health, access to basic services, social security, laying that framework for improving quality of life. And that we To a large extent, there are quite a lot of strategy programs within the education and health sectors that have already been implemented. But we need to look at different ways to continue to invest in developing a viable education ecosystem. At the SDG conversations that we had, we talked about the role of education and the role of education in enabling, empowering even young people to have economic pathways to create incomes for themselves, jobs for themselves, and jobs for other people. And that would also significantly drive a lot of the challenges we're having with young people who are also not employable. We talked about the importance of, yes, understanding that we have scarce resources, but also finding ways to implement measures. So there are also quite a lot of focus around, even with the limited funds that are available, how do we effectively put in place monitoring and evaluation mechanisms to see the kind of improvement in quality of life measures that we want to see. And again, the importance of investing in the social and social and political empowerment of women and girls across the country. The next sub-theme we talked about focused on national security. And we had two conversations there. We had one at the high-level plenary session, and then we also had another side conversation. And the consistent theme, not just even in the conversations around national security, but all the conversations we had, was the role and the importance of the quality of the political economy, political engagement, and also governance from the local, state, and national level across the board. How we as citizens need to also be actively engaged in developing, with a long-term look, efficient and strong political economic structures that would also allow us to demand from the system as we're doing that. And that having a very structured political economy framework allows us to even affect all the other areas we're talking about, from whether it's economy, from education, health, and all the different areas. And how we need to ensure that we are proactively engaged to increase the participation of politically marginalized groups, again, such as women and young people. The fourth conversation we had, or we've been having, after the political economy conversations, next slide, please, was around digital transformation. And unlike in previous years where we've had separate conversations on digital transformation, what has been a concurrent conversation across all the sessions that we've had was that digital transformation cuts across all the areas that we're having. If we're talking about the role of scale, of impact, of measurement, whether we're talking about digital identity from individual citizens, if we're talking about the role and impact of education and being able to scale, ensure that people have quality education across all levels, ensure jobs are created, ensure we're creating a viable investment and attractive destination for Nigeria, ensuring high and sustained growth, ensuring good level of security for lives and livelihoods, digital transformation cuts across the board. So again, I've spent the last 5 minutes giving a very, very high-level summary of very intensive conversations that have happened over the last 30 to 40 hours. As it is with the tradition of the NESG, and after each Nigerian Economic Summit, a green book will be developed within the next 3 to 4 weeks, which will be presented to the members of the public, and which we will be engaging, and which will then pass on for the further work that will be done within the policy commissions, the committees of practice, and the roundtable that we have within the NESG. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your engagement, and we will be sharing with you further details of the report. Thank you so much.
As she was presenting, somebody said, "Lie way." That shows how brilliantly she has delivered it. But I want to also say that the Joint Planning Committee, the Technical Committee, especially the rapporteurs, and my very good brother Yinka upstairs who are organizing all the videos, can we put our hands together and celebrate these amazing people? I love the way the chairman put it at the opening ceremony yesterday. He said, these people pay to serve. I can't see anything more sacrificial than that. Amazing human beings. Thank you very much. So, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment that we shall be visualizing a Nigeria of our future, where we have very special discussion with His Excellency, the Vice President. So our lead discussants are Mr. Kyari Booker, former chairman of the NESG. I'd like to welcome him to the podium. Let me also welcome Ms. Chichi Aniagolu Okoye, Country Director, Ford Foundation. Give her space, let her pass, please. Thank you very much, we welcome you. And now that the two discussants are here, they will hold a meeting about how to welcome His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to the stage. Your Excellency, we welcome you. We have two lead discussants. I hand the discussion over to the two of them. Over to you.
Does this work?
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
Your Excellency, the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, Executive Governors, Honorable Ministers, particularly our host, the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning. We are going to cut to the chase because we don't have a lot of time, so we will have our conversation with the star of the moment. I have been itching to have a private discussion with Your Excellency. Never had the opportunity, even while I was at a dining table some years back. But now I have you. So we want to discuss a few things. And one is basically one of the things our keynote speaker yesterday stressed on. And also in the summary, it was the first point raised, which is sustained rapid economic growth. There were three major points the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia mentioned, but I'm going to stick to one, and that's the first one. He said a commitment to inclusive, sustained economic growth. And that, Your Excellency, is something that in the last 6 years or so should have been keeping you awake from time to time, but it's probably one of the pillars of any nation's growth, is that commitment. How can we, as a nation, go into that rarefied space of double-digit economic growth?
Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. I think that obviously this will be a whole afternoon to talk about how we need to get to double-digit growth. But some of the key issues that I think we should look at are, first, the very notion of a productive economy, an economy that is focused on productivity and all that enables productivity. And you will find immediately that there will be some constraints. So, for example, population growth at the rate that we're going, we need to, if we're not, if we don't, and maybe we'll have time to dimension that in some detail, but population growth is obviously an issue, especially where productivity isn't matching population growth at all. Now, that population also requires education. Of course, we all know that the vast majority of our population is young people, but that's also the strength of our nation and the strength of our economy. So education is a crucial part of being able to grow our economy. Relevant education, education that emphasizes critical analysis, that emphasizes collaboration, which are some of the critical issues today. In an education that also, of course, emphasizes technology. Now, then there are questions around gender equality as well, because really, if half of your population is not productive on account of lack of education or getting married too early and all sorts of other such issues, then you have already constrained productivity from the beginning, because obviously your entire population must be committed to the objective of productivity. So we've got to look at those sorts of issues, right? So the whole range of human capacity development, healthcare, ensuring that people are healthy and able to be productive, and that they have access to health and all of those things. So I think that there are so many components of productivity, but I think an overriding theme for me is the whole question of an economy that focuses on value addition, as opposed to just selling raw materials or selling oil without the value addition that is required. And sometimes the questions that arise around value addition, and people will ask the question, okay, so how do you add value in an economy where you're basically not, where you require power, you need to import a lot of your components and all that. But then there are all sorts of incredible examples of even where people have power constraints, even India and countries like that have power constraints. These are cost issues. Yes, with improved power, you can actually produce cheaper, but these should not be a hindrance. So those are some of my initial thoughts, yes.
Techichi?
Your Excellency, thank you very much for that answer. And I think it leads very well into the question I was going to ask you, because this is about securing our future. And my question is around our fossil fuel, the divestment that's happening around the world in fossil fuel. Nigeria is a fossil fuel dependent economy, and the world is divesting from fossil fuel. Only last week, the president of the Ford Foundation, where I work, announced that Ford will be divesting its over $1 billion from fossil fuel investments. And we're dependent on fossil fuel. I read your articles and I have heard you talk about this, and you are not in support of this because you believe that this will hurt Africa very much. But the reality is that the world is moving away from fossil fuel. What is Nigeria doing and going to be doing to ensure that we are not taken by surprise and that we are prepared for the inevitable?
I think, first of all, being aware of what the real challenges are is important. And frankly, a lot of African countries and especially African petroleum or gas-producing countries appear to have more or less been somewhat asleep at the wheel on these questions of defunding of fossil fuels projects and all that. And I think that what is crucial is for us to pay attention to this, because we are confronted, okay, so the world is confronted with a climate crisis, and we are part of the world. But we are also confronted with an existential crisis of poverty and of even mortality, in fact, maternal mortality, and all of the various challenges that come with extreme poverty. So while the world, especially the wealthier countries, are focused on climate change and climate change alone, we have to be focused not just on climate change, but access to energy, which is a major constraint that we have. And we also have to keep reminding ourselves and reminding policymakers that even in terms of even in terms of how much pollution we're actually responsible for, it's a minor fraction to what the rest of the world is responsible for. I mean, so for example, the US does 15.5 tons per capita of emissions. We here, as the average in Africa, is about 0.1%, and we have far less power, we have far less access to energy. So the truth of the matter is that this transition to zero emissions by 2050 or 2060 or whenever must be based on fairness and equity and justice. And I think it's important for us to keep emphasizing this and to also negotiate this. So we shouldn't be negotiating just national contributions, which is what the NDCs, which is what we spend a lot of our time doing. We must negotiate the terms of this transition. We must ensure that the 100 billion a year that the OECD countries promised as funds towards the transition for developing economies, that they are faithful to that promise. So I think that really it's time for a lot of hard bargaining, a lot of hard-nosed bargaining, and we mustn't be shy of stating very clearly that yes, we are part of this whole movement for zero emissions, and we believe in it, but we are not the worst polluters, and we are being asked to make the greatest sacrifice, and this is, if you look at it, today we experience severe manifestations of climate change, flooding in various parts of our country. But this climate change that we're experiencing, the manifestations of it were not caused by us. We didn't cause this, but we receive practically all of the problems associated with it. So I think it's important that there be fairness. It's important that there be justice, and we must simply be very hard-nosed about this. Yes.
Okay. We know that this is a very young country. Both the Ford Foundation and MacArthur Foundation had put up, I believe, $5 million fund. And of course, if we just reel back a year ago, somewhere in June or July, the federal government had also put aside 75 billion naira for investing in the youth. Now, two things, actually a number of things. One is that how is the utilization of that fund and the impact, particularly on the youth? Of course, it is targeting the youth. But the other one is actually a debate that I had with somebody this morning about what I call the dumbbell effect. Dumbbell is, I lift weights these days. So I have maybe 5 kg on each side, I lift it. Nigeria exports crude oil, that's one of the heavy weights, but it is a dying product or service to the world. But we do not factor in the export, albeit begrudgingly, which is the intellectual capital that is leaving the shores of Nigeria. I chair a company, a startup, where we lost 5 developers, 4 to Canada, 1 to Netherlands. Now, if it is done deliberately, that can also be a source of investment or cash flow or FDI coming back to the country. Because when they create more, there are opportunities of creating jobs, both globally as well as locally. If you can address the two-pronged question, which is coming out more as a statement than a question, Your Excellency. If you can touch on both elements. But the aim is the youth.
Okay. First, let me say that the only way to ensure that young people don't vote with their feet is to create the environment that makes it rewarding, especially economically rewarding, for them to remain here. And there is a competition for resources. There's a competition for human resources all across the world. So you're going to find that, young people will move in the direction where their resources, where their human resources are best appreciated in terms of what they earn. Now, that is not new, because if you look at several countries of the world, you'll find that there's huge migration. The Indians, the Chinese, moving in the direction where they are best appreciated. So it's not necessarily a Nigerian phenomenon, but I think the most important thing to emphasize is, so how then do we create the circumstances that enable us to retain the talents that we have? How do we create those circumstances? Now, there are all manner of things. One, of course, is the business environment itself. Is the business environment one that's favorable? Truth is that there are very many reasons, and just as you tell the stories of failure, the stories of success are also there. I mean, you mustn't forget that of the 5 so-called unicorn startups, 4 of them are Nigerians and based here in Nigeria. I mean, your Flutterwaves, your Opes, InterSwitch, etc. So that's an important point to make. So it does mean that there is something to be said for the environment even as it is. In other words, you can find accessible, cheap capital, right? Now, I'm talking of human resources now. And then in terms of also funding, and today funding comes from practically anywhere, right? Which is helpful. So for me, I think that the most important thing is how do we create this environment? You've spoken about some of the funds that are available. So the youth fund is one, the 75 billion youth fund. There's also the IDICE fund, the investment and enterprise fund that is promoted now by the AFDB with Nigeria. And then the central bank also has a creativity fund. What we've tried to do is we have a creativity and advisory group, a technology creativity advisory group, which really tries to bring in, young entrepreneurs, innovators, etc., to define policy, to try and formulate policy with policymakers. And we've been reasonably successful, because you'll find that, so for fintech, there's a wide range of licenses that the CBN is now able to give. And a lot of that was on account of the advice from these young men and women in the advisory groups. So, the payment solution licenses, the super agent licenses, the mobile operator licenses that you can now get without necessarily being a deposit-taking bank are examples of how to make the environment right for this sort of thing. And, I mean, Flutterwave, for example, I believe now has a super agent bank, a super agent license, which is an enabler. You would go to other countries, and that's the honest truth. Several of the countries that have been held up as some sort of models, and you will not get the kind of licenses that we're talking about. You won't get that sort of slice of the pie. So I think that as we go forward, we must just really make it easy. And for the startups, a lot of these funds will be helpful. And one of the things that we've been talking about is how to formulate policy around access to capital, because there are several funds. If you aggregate the funds today, you are looking at almost $750 billion, right, in terms of naira, in terms of just funds that are available. But you hear the same complaints. We can't access this money. How do we get these funds? So I think that one of the very critical things that we need to do is working with entrepreneurs, working with the young men and women who are innovators. Try and find the ways by which we can actually make access to capital easier. How do we de-risk these funds so that they're able to access them? Because obviously, you want to make sure that these funds are, can be paid back, But again, if you look at some of the investors in technology and innovation, they're not asking for, they're asking for equity. Many are not asking for an arm and a leg or any kind of collateral. So we must move in that general direction and, be able to put up the kind of patient capital that would make a difference in this, for these things. So I think that it's an evolving process. It's an evolving space. There's a lot to be done. There's a lot to contribute to, just in terms of formulating policy. But we're really at the beginnings and, frankly, at the inception of pretty exciting times for startups and for businesses in Nigeria. Yes.
Some of these funds, as you've mentioned, are not what the traditional businesses are looking for, debt. It's actually more of equity, patient capital, take the risk alongside those young people, and can be an exciting play where one of our funds actually did 15x in 4 years, 15x of the initial investment. So, I mean, these, you only hear these, but as witness, I tell you that don't let a young person who may have a foolish idea walk in and ask for $50,000 or a few million naira. Please do due diligence and be a party to the investment. Dr. Chichi.
Yeah, Your Excellency. I think this really helps dovetail into what I want to talk about, and that's the underbelly of the economy. When discussions on the economy are held, as we are having today, most of the focus is on the ease of doing business, access to finance, and the rest of it. But very little is spoken about, the inequalities in the underbelly of the economy. And I'm particularly interested in the violence against women in the workplace and in the marketplace. I met a young lady a while ago who lost her job because she was because she was pregnant. One of them was because she was pregnant, and she just had her job terminated. Another one was being sexually harassed, and she felt the need to learn. This is a nurse in a hospital setting. And so I recognize that the government has done a lot. We have the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, and also the emergency law that had been put in place. But my question is, how are we ensuring, actually, as we were talking about the future, 50% of our population are women, 50% of people in the economy, especially in the informal sector, are women. What is the government doing and going to be doing to ensure that women are protected in the workplace, especially as we do not have a violence against persons policy in the workplace? How do we ensure that as the future of work is being discussed, that we are also discussing the underbelly and the protection of the vulnerable people in the workplace, especially women?
Okay, I think first, again, we must acknowledge that we don't even have an option with ensuring that women are as productive as they are able to, and they are, that they are treated equally in every way, in terms of the human capital development, in terms of access to justice, in terms of access to benefits. Because aside from everything else, it makes economic sense. It's absolutely the sensible thing to do. So I think that as a starting point, we must persuade ourselves and our people that this is not a favor. I mean, that equal rights for women, dealing with gender issues with the sensitivity and importance that should be attached to it, is not a favor being done to women. We're all, it's a universal benefit. It benefits every one of us if we're able to do so. I think that mindset is crucial because, okay, so we have the laws, we have the violence against persons laws and all that, but you find that social habits are not catching up with the laws. So enforcement of the laws become difficult because social habits are not catching up. I mean, you still find people confront women who are harassed or who are even raped or assaulted in one shape or form or the other. Before law enforcement, I mean, of course, who are mostly male, the kinds of experiences that they go through are, at best, they're just humiliating in most cases. And when you get the feedback, for instance, in my office, we have a rule of law team in my office, where we've been doing quite a bit of work with the various states on the Violence Against Persons Act, Child Rights Act, and all of that. Trying to get the states to domesticate these laws and all that. And then all sorts of other sensitization efforts being made. But you find that it really must start with an understanding of why this makes sense for us. Because really, it goes beyond just making laws. It comes down to enforcement because the laws we've made are there, but we're not getting the benefits of those laws because it's taking a bit of time for culture and for social habits, negative social habits by and large, to catch up with where we are in terms of legislation. So I think that a lot more sensitization is required. I think that a lot more publicity should be given to those who are punished for these kinds of activities. We should, so for example, sexual harassment. It is only where people are caught red-handed or something that you'll find that there is any. So perhaps we should be looking at policies in the workplace that emphasize, reportability, emphasize the giving young women the access, or women the access, to be able to complain, and that this should be heard and attended to by persons who have some training in these things. So I personally believe that we are, and in some ways, when you compare us with several other parts of the world, especially even the more developed economies of the world, I think that just in terms of the legislation, in terms of policy, we are almost where they are. But we need to really, sensitize social behavior a lot more so that we can catch up with this. So it's both policy, legislation, but my view is that more importantly, how do we change mindsets? Yeah, I think the political will is evident, frankly, because the political will is what is demonstrated through policy and laws. But it goes beyond political will. You must now have, the capacity to change minds. So people who regard women as chattel, it goes beyond political will to change their minds about that. People who think that women are inferior, you've got to have, it's a mindset thing. You have the laws that say all of us are created equal. Then you have the laws against violence. Then you have, policy and all of that. But you still need that extra bit of sensitization to get people to the point. Yes.
Yes. It is said, and it's one of my beliefs, that whatever you envision becomes your life. I.e., if the vision is for a Nigeria that is a major factor in the global economy, then it shall happen. Now, we have been talking about Nigeria's potential for a great deal of time. Now, whether it is political will or in executing those nice plans that we come up with, because as our keynote speaker highlighted, the idea of industrial parks was literally lifted from Nigeria, and they tend to do a better job of implementing than ours. But I may be mistaken. Maybe we have here and there some spots where that has been functioning well. Now, there is a transition going on globally from factor-based economy to what I would call knowledge-based economy. We are seeing it around. We've just discussed it. The digital transformation is going at a very faster pace. That basically means one of the key factors, which is education, need to be tweaked, need to be indeed disrupted in such a manner that what we call traditional education must change. We look at the inflows, capital inflows into Nigeria. In the great old days when oil had gone up to 100 or above 100, we used to see that bucket, that pillar is the largest. Today, it is the diaspora remittances and very little FDI. We used to see 60 to 80 billion at one time coming in for FDI, and then maybe another 60 or so crude oil. Today, it is the third pillar, which is Nigerians outside sending money, that has become the major contributor. But money actually comes to an environment that is receptive. Ease of doing business, seen Dr. Jumoke, and also the rule of law, many other things that can resist inflow of capital can be lifted. Now, what can you say about some of those various levers that I have touched on? Education, probably good healthcare, possibly improving on the ease of doing business. Nigeria has moved tremendously, by the way. I'm not discounting that, but there is a lot more that needs to happen. What can you talk to? Can you take us through that in your mind, and also the vision you would have going forward for Nigeria?
First with education, I think that there's no question at all that we have to really move along with education especially education that's relevant to the sorts of opportunities and jobs that are available today. And so there's no question at all that we must emphasize, especially science, technology, engineering, and maths, the so-called STEM. And we say STEAM because we add the arts to it. So that's an area of emphasis for us. That's an area where, of course, the curriculum is being redeveloped in order to be able to accommodate that. But the truth is that even with the best curriculum, you obviously must have the sorts of teachers that you require to instruct in these areas. And even for teaching, a whole reorientation is required, even for teaching. So you're teaching people now, this is not learning by rote. You're teaching people collaboration, you're teaching people, critical inquiry skills, so you're teaching in a completely different way. So all of that is also factored into teacher training and the various models. And there are quite a few models that have been developed, quite a few models that have been experimented with already. But I think that, the major challenge is for us to be able to adopt this at the state level. Because don't forget that basic education, primary education, and secondary are really the province of the states, as opposed to the federal government. The federal government does not handle primary education or secondary education. Yes, we do have a couple of unity schools, some unity schools, but these are really the business of the states. So in all that we're trying to do, so we're developing a STEM or STEAM in our case, curriculum and also teaching. And we need to really get these into the various states of the Federation. We have quite a few states at the level of the National Economic Council, which I have the privilege of chairing. one of the things that we try to do is to look at the whole human capital development space, so education and healthcare, and we have a whole dashboard where we're looking at, so how far has Zamfara gone? How far has Benue gone? How far has Ekiti gone, or Lagos, or for that matter, Imo or Anambra? How far have they gone, just in terms of educational development? So what the federal government tries to do essentially is to set the standards, and then support in whatever way that is possible. But it's a huge enterprise, this business of education. Clearly, it's a massive enterprise. And I think that, we're also finding a lot of entrepreneurial activity even around it, So we're finding a lot of educational type tech that is for, some of them are used for in primary schools. I know that Borno State, for example, is adopting some of these edutech type models and all of that. Edo State is also adopting that in their Edo Best and all that. So I think that this is a huge enterprise, and we must just keep our focus on what we need to do, namely the curriculum and teacher training. Then the other questions around where our place will be in the fourth industrial revolution. My sense of that is that we have the best advantage, which is that we have young people. The majority of our population, over 60%, are under 25. They are creative, they're innovative, they're ready to go. What we really need to do, of course, as I've said earlier, is to see how we can support them, access to capital, training, etc. But the other good thing is that there's a lot of self-education that is involved in technology. And so we find that, people are training themselves in software development, in program writing, code writing, etc. And we're finding that they're able to do this at great, that they're able to do this with a lot of, with support. So I think that we're in a good place, quite frankly, but there is a lot that can be done. And I'm a strong believer in the fact that government's business must be to just take care of the macro issues and ensure that we have, at least access to capital, access to good training and all that. And we tried that, we experimented with that quite a bit with our Empower program, where we gave tablets, such as the one I have here, to about 300,000 or so of these young people. And those tablets were loaded with material for entrepreneurial training, material for code writing, software, writing skills, etc., software development skills and all that. And, many of them were able to benefit. Others just wanted to, were extension workers, public health workers, etc. So they had the training material. So it's now possible for us to train millions of people. We have an open portal. You can simply you can go up to that open portal with your device, whether it's a phone or tablet or whatever. So I think the opportunities are huge for training and for getting many young people into that space.
Wonderful. Dr. Chichi.
Yes, Your Excellency. A while back, I read a survey that surprised me. It was a survey that talked to investors who go to, who invest in different countries and, of course, who move to those countries at some point. And they were asked what was the top most important things that, incentivized them to go to a country. And surprisingly, they said good education for their children was number one, good health care for their family was number two, and number three was leisure, good leisure for themselves and for their family. And for most of them who were then interviewed, they said profit was important, but not the most important thing, but the good quality of life for them and their children, wherever it is they're moving to, because they are going to live there and they want to have good quality of life. These are amenities that we're still struggling with in our country. And maybe because we still look at them from a social amenities perspective, when we talk about healthcare or education, we're looking at it as, social services that we're providing to our people. And we also know that there's a lot of leakages in terms, of tax avoidance for many companies that are making it difficult for us to have the funding that is required to actually provide these amenities. Will it make a difference in the way we provide services in the country if the government begins to see social amenities not just as a service to people, but also as a critical part of attracting investors? Will it incentivize us to begin to invest in our healthcare, in our education, in order to meet international standards?
Absolutely. I fully agree, that even not just for attracting investments, even for the standards of living of people who live here. I think it's an important thing, because just as you said, yes, generally well-being, the happiness of individuals, how they feel, especially when they have children, it's even more so. They want their children to have the best possible facilities, etc. So there's no question at all, in my view, about improvement of social services for purposes of ensuring the well-being of individuals. I think that's absolutely a case that makes itself. But the question then is, how do you get to that point? And a lot, in my view, would have to do with, obviously, government policy and government action. But I also think that we must be ready for why government action is not always as effective as it ought to be. But just take healthcare, for example. So healthcare is a matter that we, at the moment, fund from budget. So it depends a great deal on revenues. And of course, we have, huge revenue challenges. So what is the antidote to that, or what's our answer to that? The answer to that is healthcare insurance, compulsory insurance. Now, compulsory insurance ensures that we're able to pool resources, that we're able to aggregate resources from premiums that everyone pays, and the government pays for those who cannot do so. So, without compulsory health insurance, we simply cannot bring together the resources that are required to provide decent health care for 200 people growing by 5 million every year. There's no way we can provide those resources. So I think that the first thing is, as an example, healthcare. First thing is, what do we need to do that will be a game changer? And I think that game changer is health insurance. And when you then look at it, okay, so public health, we've been able to more or less set a standard for public health. And that was seen in our COVID-19 response. And I think that our response to COVID-19, a major public health challenge, was probably one of the best anywhere in the world, just in terms of the response. And why is that so? Why was that so? Reason is that we've had years of developing a public health system. So we're familiar with how to deal with Lassa fever, how to deal with malaria, how to deal with polio. We've done immunizations on scale, and unlike other countries that haven't done any immunization except immunization of children at birth, we have a lot of experience, and we have a lot of experienced hands in doing so. But clinical health is an area where we have deficiencies. So we need to better equip hospitals. We need to develop formats around how even hospital care makes sense for those who are providing the service. In other words, they're able to make money from it and reinvest. And how it also makes sense from the point of view of the patient, who mustn't always be paying out of pocket. So we're at a point now with the Healthcare Reform Committee, which I have the privilege of chairing, where we're looking at all these options and we're trying to see in what ways can we ensure that this would work. So there are huge, if you like, huge revolutionary changes that need to be made. And I believe that they are entirely possible. I believe they're entirely possible. And that we're at a point where, these things are accessible to us. We can do these things. And so I am certainly looking forward to, especially in the healthcare sector, some of the reform that is possible. Just a few days ago, we were opening a hospital in Lagos where, this is supposed to reverse the medical tourism that we find and all that. And what this hospital was able to show us is, first of all, the sheer number of doctors in diaspora who are experts in their various fields, who are coming home to work. Now, the doctor who comes to consult and do his operations is still available for work elsewhere, And so, even the way medical service is delivered today is so radically different from the way it used to be that it is possible now to get the best of help. While we were there in one theater, we were able to communicate with some other expert who was, I believe was in the US, who was able to talk to us. So even medicine, telemedicine is entirely possible, it's available. So I think, that there is, in my view, these are exciting times. There's a lot that we can do.
Lovely.
So I definitely believe that we can do a lot.
Talking about leisure, there is an element that you touched on, and I want you to elaborate a bit. And that is that if we look at the GDP of Nigeria, the combination of the creative industry, meaning Nollywood, the music, artistic endeavors such as painting, sculpture, combined is about 8 to nearly 9% of our GDP. Oil and gas is less than that. And it creates more jobs. And therefore, we should also focus on that. Of course, you've mentioned about the CBN Intervention Fund. Are there any purposeful policy-related issues that is pushing resources into that aspect, since job creation is one of the major goals or objectives of this administration?
I spoke earlier about the Technology and Creativity Advisory Group, and really the creativity aspect of it is that is the Nollywoods and the entertainment and that whole industry. And I think that, again, there's support in terms of funding. But what I've found is really that we're not able to, because entertainment, the infrastructure that's required, the ecosystem, the needs of that ecosystem are not this. So it's different, for instance, from an innovator who can say, this is my product, I'll need X amount of money to take it to market, and then we can all make money. So the actor requires infrastructure. It requires studios and services like that, as opposed to necessarily money in their hands. So it is a slightly different model, and what we've been trying to do is to see how we can be more effective in getting resources that are the right type of resources for creativity. So, and there's a huge deficit in terms of infrastructure, studios where people can record, dance studios, etc., places where people can record films and things like that. There's a huge deficit. And we think that with some of the funding that we're seeing, there's a major project that's going on around the National Theatre in Lagos, which is funded by the banks, by the CBN and our banks. And this is devoted entirely to creativity. So there will be we'll find that creating a hub of that sort, where you have studios, you have all sorts of facilities, will be helpful, But I think that this is a massive area. It's an area where we certainly need a lot more investment, a lot more government investment, and a lot more private sector investment. And people are beginning to see that this is, and thankfully is one of those areas that grew organically, right? So I mean, we just suddenly found almost that, well, here we have Nollywood, and then here we have all these incredible entertainers who are using social media in particular to get their messages across and get their art across. So I think that so long as government doesn't get in the way, because again, too much government can become a hindrance. I think that once we're able to support in creative and innovative ways, we should be able to do something in that area.
Right. Okay. Dr. Chichi.
Yeah, this is my last question, Your Excellency, and it's on civil society. A nascent economy as Nigeria needs all the help that it can get, and civil society organizations have traditionally played a role in supporting communities and areas, that the government has sometimes struggled with. But more recently in Nigeria, we're beginning to see the closing of civil society space. We're finding that the idea that instead of seeing civil society as being partners in development, there is a tendency to see them more as being obtrusive and and needing to be restructured or caged or whatever. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are around that, because if you look internationally, civil society organizations have a space internationally, and they're listened to, and sometimes even more than governments. And so being able to cultivate a civil society that is a partner to government is a good way to go. Let me just put it that way. But that does not seem to be the approach that we are seeing. The space is closing, and a lot of civil society, not just in Nigeria, but across Africa, civil society organizations are feeling a lot of pressure from government, whether it is through policies and laws or directly. And so my question is, what is your response to that, and how is the government going to support civil society in partnership to be able to improve the economy and everything else?
Okay, first, I'm probably not the best person to ask, because I also have, as you know, a civil society background. So I completely sympathize with how civil society is perceived as irritants and as dangerous people getting funding from abroad to be subversive and all sorts of such characterizations. But I think that the truth is that civil society is relevant because we have no choice. It's absolutely relevant because, so here you have a space. So you have the public space, you have the private space. But there are people who must do stuff that is not for profit and that benefits society. And that space must grow. We have absolutely no choice with that space, because when you look at it, even if you look at the activities of civil society, because it's a wide spectrum, of course. Look at the northeast, where you have conflicts. You have a plethora of civil society groups working every day in those spaces, places where no one else will go, or at least nobody else. Even if you paid them, they wouldn't go there. So these are active people in these spaces. I think where you may have tensions is civil society groups in the areas of civil and political rights, human rights, and all of that, which are areas of natural tension with government, And I'm not so sure that the time will come when you will not experience those tensions. I think that those tensions are because here you have government has a monopoly of force, right? Then you have these other guys who, are saying that we want to hold you to account. The honest truth is that nobody really wants to be held to account, right? That's the honest truth. If you can avoid being held to account. So, but I think that what must happen is that civil society groups must press their claim to what it is that they're entitled to. I mean, we had civil society groups even in the military. Under the military, we had Civil Liberties Organization, we had Integrity, we had quite a few organizations that simply said, we are going to insist on the rights of people, we are going to insist on political rights or civil rights and all of that. So I think that civil society groups must also understand that these tensions are going to be there, but they must, and in the democratic space, it's easier. It's much easier. So they must, as it were, be bold and be assertive and work as much as possible. And I also think that sometimes, it's possible to work with governments, and we do quite a bit of work, by the way. I mean, for instance, in practically all of the work we do on gender issues and all of that, it's in collaboration with civil society. All the work we did, the Social Investment Fund that Miriam Uwais was working on, this is a huge, massive thing, was all with civil society. In fact, we invited civil society to audit the process. About 5, 6 different civil society groups audited the process and published a report. So I think, it works. But my sense of it is that we must, we will always have those tensions, and those in civil society must also, find out, we just got to be ready to keep engaging government. But frankly, I don't know that there will ever come a time when government will say, I'm very happy that you want to find out some misdeeds and I'll willingly submit. I doubt that day will come. I really doubt that day will come. Thanks.
I want to say that the opportunity for a fireside chat has been robust. But the other thing that I want to stress on is that with the theme for these last 2 days session being Securing Our Future, the fierce urgency of now, I'd like to give His Excellency the last word, just in case we haven't touched on some subject matters that is burning inside of you that have not come out yet. If you can, in the next few minutes, share with us going forward what you have for not only the private sector, but also the power of collaboration between the private and public sector, Your Excellency.
Yes, thank you. I think first, I think the primary thing for me is hope. I think there is a great deal of, I think we must focus on what this country offers, just in terms of all of the resources we have, human, natural, all the resources we have, and also the will, the energy, the innovativeness of the Nigerian. I think that this sort of country, a country with all that we have, simply cannot fail. And it is only a matter of getting things right, getting a few things right, moving a few things around, and we'll be well on our way to the kind of progress that we ought to experience as a country. And quite frankly, I do not believe that is necessarily a difficult thing. Politics, governance, and all of that can get in the way sometimes of development and of progress. So you're trying to achieve certain objectives, but there are all manner of hindrances, difficulties, etc. But at the same time, I think that we're learning. I think that we're getting better at being able to deliver. For example, we all recognize that for us, it's not policy. It's implementing, it's getting things done. So we're looking at what is the fastest way of moving from point A to point B in terms of policy. We recognize, for example, that look at issues of corruption, right? So let's even leave high-level corruption to just, I want to obtain a passport, I want to obtain a license, any approvals from government agencies, etc. We recognize that the more we're able to remove discretion from individuals, the more we're able to put services on electronic platforms, removing all that need for interference and all that, the better. Now, in some cases, even that is subverted, but it's because we haven't been able to work it end to end. So even in establishments where things are supposed to happen online, you might still end up in front of a government official who says that unless you part with money, that you are not going to be able to get the service. But we can do it end to end. And it is possible for us to develop those systems, and we're developing those systems to be able to do end-to-end, apply online, and get it online. Some of it has been in fits and starts. For example, when we started under the ease of doing business, our visa on arrival, yes, we were able to achieve a good measure of momentum, but there are constraints, there are problems. But we now know how to move from point A to point B. And I believe very strongly that all of the great ideas that we have, the young people waiting to unleash simply all their energy and their resourcefulness on the world, I think all of those are just waiting to happen. And I believe very strongly that this country, affords us the opportunity, it affords us the space to be able to achieve great things. So for me, I think we should just keep our focus and just focus on hope, and especially the private sector. I believe that the private sector in Nigeria, I mean, there's no, just in terms of resilience, coping with stuff. I think we've done very, very well. I think private sector has done very well indeed. And I strongly believe that with what we have learned, even coping with the post-pandemic business after the pandemic, and how we've been able to look, transport, for example, went down 49% in the COVID. Now they're back to 77%. The construction went down by almost 40%. I mean, it's a much more modest back to positive. But we can see that there is, there's a will to do things. There's energy. There is, resilience, resourcefulness. So my take is that this country is one that is waiting to happen, and it will happen, and it will take all our resources and all of our own, all of our effort to make it happen, and it will happen.
Amen. It will happen. With this, we come to the end of this session as well. Thank you, Dr. Chichi. We tag-teamed and ganged up on you, Your Excellency. Thank you for the patience and, of course, the eloquence in articulating, your thoughts. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And so shall we put our hands together for them, ladies and gentlemen, as they step down now. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's keep a round of applause going as they get until the Vice President gets to his seat. Thank you. Thank you. Let's be seated now, please. Thank you. Your Excellency, the Vice President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is the 27th edition of the Nigerian Economic Summit. But from the founding fathers, from the first edition till now, the concept was designed for a public-private collaboration. Yesterday, during the plenary session 2, urgency and audacity of public reform before reform, driving change and accountability. I will note that the head of the Civil Service of the Federation noted the amazing patriotic work that the Ike Imokwede Foundation has done to the civil service of the Federation. We say thank you to you, and we say thank you to all the patriotic Nigerians. So, in this regard, we shall be having a signing ceremony, which the Vice President will witness. We'll be having the chairman of the Agi Mokwede Foundation, that is Mr. Aigboji Agi Mokwede, and Mrs. Ofowe Agi Mokwede to be on standby. And then the head of the Civil Service of the Federation and the Vice President will witness the signing. But before then, let me invite her, because it's public-private, the Permanent Secretary, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Olushola Idowu, to do a quick vote of thanks.
Your Excellency, the Vice President of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Oshibajo, SAN, GCON. Your Excellencies, the Executive Governors here present. Your Excellencies, the Honorable Ministers, Minister of Finance, Budgets and National Planning, Minister of FCT, the Head of the Civil Service of Nigeria, Permanent Secretaries. Please allow me to align with the existing protocol. On behalf of the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budgets and National Planning and the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, I want to thank the Almighty God for making the 27th Nigerian Economic Summit a huge success. We are particularly grateful to His Excellency, President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Federal Republic of Nigeria, for delivering the opening address and declaring the summit open. This singular honor is a testament to the commitment of the federal government to the summit process. We are most grateful, and we say, Nagode, sir. His Excellency, the Vice President, Professor Yemi Oshibajo, SAN-GCON, has always been a source of inspiration and has guided us through the summit preparation process. Your continued support to the ministry and the summit is well appreciated, and we say, Adupe, sir. Your Excellency, former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, who delivered the summit keynote address, we really appreciate your frank words and your passion to see Africa and indeed Nigeria succeed. You are indeed a worthy friend. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, permit me to extend our sincere appreciation to the leadership and membership of the National Assembly, the state governors, for participating actively during the two-day event. Their commitment to this summit demonstrates the determination of the various tiers of government to work with private sector to realize the country's developmental aspirations. We are very grateful to all the honorable ministers, the head of the Civil Service of the Federation, my colleagues, permanent secretaries, and other senior officials of the government, both at the federal and the state level, for their active participation in the summit. Also worthy of mention is our private sector partners who have worked round the clock to ensure the success of this summit. We appreciate you all. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I also want to use this opportunity to express our heartfelt appreciation to the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budgets and National Planning, and the Honorable Minister of State, Budgets and National Planning, for their support and providing direction, as well as superintending over the summit process. We thank you for your leadership. I would like to thank and appreciate the chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Mr. Ighodalo, for his effort. He has shown understanding and commitment in ensuring the success of the summit. The CEO, Mr. Laoye Yayola, also deserves our thanks for the leadership and commitment in coordinating this event. Both the chairman and the CEO provided the needed inspiration to the members of the Joint Planning Committee and other key officials throughout the planning of the summit, we say thank you. I'd like to appreciate in a special way institutions, corporate organizations, and individuals that contributed financially and materially towards the hosting of the summit, and in particular, our diamond sponsors, Stanbic IBTC, Infest, our gold sponsors, Flour Mill of Nigeria, Shell Petroleum Development Company, our silver sponsors, MTN Nigeria, Total Energies, Nigeria LNG Limited, and Kingmakers. We appreciate and cherish your generous contribution. Furthermore, I'd like to appreciate our esteemed foreign guests, resource persons, chairmen and chairpersons of the different sessions, moderators and panelists. You brought your wealth of experience and have contributed immensely to the success of this summit. We say a big thank you. I also want to especially thank the co-chairs, public and private sectors, all members of the Joint Planning Committee and other officials that have worked tirelessly to make the summit a resounding success, and I say well done. I'll not end this vote of thanks without appreciating our friends in the media for always being very supportive. I salute your objective reportage and cooperation. Our sincere gratitude goes to the rapporteurs, whom we entrust with the responsibility of capturing the minute details of all that transpired during the summit. You are indeed wonderful. Finally, from the summit, two words came out vividly: collaboration and implementation. And I call that collaborating to implement, that is the public and the private. It is exciting when we come together, despite our differences, to discuss, dialogue, debate, and deliberate on issues. But it's far more exciting when we work together on those discussions to action, implementing a collective decision. I will not fail to thank all our most valued participants for attending this summit. I trust that we are going back more determined in our resolve to make Nigeria a prosperous country, and we are determined to secure our future, and the time is now. Finally, in anticipation of that determination, I want to say to all, Nagode, Dalu, Adupe, Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Wishing you all journey mercies back to our various destinations, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Can we make the applause collaborative? Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is a moment that we actualize the collaboration between the private and the public sector. Mr. Olusegun Adeniyi, Chairman of the editorial board of this day, will handle this segment.
Thank you, Barry. Your Excellency, Mr. Vice President, Honorable Ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to witness a signing ceremony between the Office of the Head of Civil Service of the Federation and the Igimokwede Foundation. This occasion is a celebration of the type of public-private collaboration aimed at driving public sector reform that the present administration has been pushing for. The document that will be signed here today is the collaboration agreement between the Igimokwede Foundation and the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation to commence the implementation of the Enterprise Content Management Solution, ECMS, a digitalization project and one of the priority areas of the Federal Civil Service Strategy and Implementation Plan 2017 to 2020. Please join me to welcome upstage the signatories from the Federal Civil Service, Dr. Yemi Folashade Eson, and the Igimokwede Foundation, Mr. Aigoje Igimokwede. The journey started in 2017 when the Vice President facilitated the partnership between the Office of the Head of Civil Service and the Ig Imokede Foundation subsidiary, the African Initiative for Governance, to develop a clear communicable action plan building on the Federal Civil Service Strategic Plan 2017 to 2019. Following the signing of an MOU, which the AIG supported, the development of the revised strategic plan through the engagement of McKinsey and Company. The ensuing Federal Civil Service Strategy and Implementation Plan received the approval of the Federal Executive Council on the 12th of July 2017 and has been implemented with continued strategic support and funding from the Ig Imokede Foundation. In line with the digitization objectives of the Federal Civil Service, AIG collaborated with the Office of the Head of the Civil Service to develop a policy on virtual meetings to address the workplace disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The next objective was the implementation of an enterprise content management solution aimed at digitalizing the work of the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation, one of the priority areas of the FCSIP. The EMS will provide the ability to manage electronic content through the entire life cycle of a processed document, including document creation, distribution, utilization, retention, and disposition. The goal of the ECMS solution is to create efficiency and effectiveness and ensure the integrity of processes and their outcomes, as well as reposition the Federal Civil Service for better performance and improved quality. The Ig Imokede Foundation has been working with the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation, providing necessary consulting support, resources, and funding for the full implementation of the ECMS, with the project being implemented in stages. The first stage was the development of standard operating procedures, which have been completed by the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation and is currently undergoing adoption by all the federal government of Nigerian ministries, departments, and agencies, that is MDAs. The current stage is the organizational readiness assessment, which is assessing the state of readiness to adopt the ECMS and measure future outcomes of the project implementation. Concurrently, the office is preparing for certification, which will provide direction for establishing, developing, implementing, evaluating, maintaining, and improving the effective and responsive compliance management system within the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation, enhancing organizational readiness for the ECMS. A joint evaluation panel was set up by the Ig Imokede Foundation to develop a roadmap for the evaluation and recommendation of the appropriate vendor to implement the ECMS. This was done in collaboration with the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation. A vendor has now been identified, and we are at the final stage of funding and implementing the ECMS. Our priority areas that the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation and the Ig Imokede Foundation have been working on together include capacity building for civil servants and a culture change project to align the values of the civil servants with the objectives of the newly improved civil service. This partnership between the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation and the Ig Imokede Foundation would not have been possible without the support of His Excellency, the Vice President, who believes very strongly in the power of public-private collaboration to drive successful reforms and national development. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to witness the signing of the Enterprise Content Management Solution Collaboration Agreement. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, also to witness the signing of the agreement is the Executive Chair, Vice Chair of the Ig Imokede Foundation. Our exceptional leadership has helped the foundation to accomplish its mission of support supporting the reform initiatives of the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation. Please join me again in welcoming Mrs. Ofowe Agimokwede. I think the ceremony can proceed. I don't know very much. Everybody come and teach me how do you handle this. I don't. Everybody, away. I defer to your expertise. I think you should clap for me too. Yeah, you see now I'm a novice in this business. I think they are taking photographs, right?
Okay, so I can take over.
You can please take over.
Just the photographs, there we go. Then the Federal Civil Service. Also, that's the agreement enunciating the very essence of private-public partnership. Thank you very much. Can we have photograph first with the four who are on stage right now? The cameramen are here. Let's have the photograph now. If you want to rise, you can. Okay. Oh, you prefer them this way, or you want them to stand? Okay. They said they should stand. They said you should stand, yes. Okay, but we want to do this now, and then we'll invite the palm sex. I know. All right, so the palm sex in the house, please. The palm sex in the room now. This is service-wide, and the Nigerian civil service will begin to feel the impact of modernization, of digitization. These are the men and women driving the very nerve center of Nigerian civil service. Thank you very much. So we'll allow everybody to come down and lead His Excellency the Vice President. Let me invite the board of the NESG now to please join the Vice President on stage here. Is that? Okay. The board, FCT Minister, please join us for this photograph with His Excellency the Vice President. Or can we move the table now very quickly? Who are the... let's invite the board members. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate the Honorable Minister of Finance, the Honorable Minister of FCT. Now the next photograph will just be the board only with the Vice President. Yes, yes. Thank you. Just the board. And so while the photograph is going on, immediately after the photograph, we will take the national anthem. His Excellency the Vice President will take a tour of the exhibitions and then he will exit. But don't forget there's a press conference immediately after this, after the conference. Photographers, are you happy? Can I call for the national anthem now? The national anthem, please. Shall we all rise now for the national anthem?